Happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 168 for March 11th, 2020. My name is Jason Neiffer, and I'm the Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, joining you from what is currently COVID-less Missoula, Montana, where I am I think I already said I was the Curriculum Director. Whatever it is, I'm on the University of Montana campus in Missoula, Montana. And joining me, as always, good evening, Dr. Wesley Fryer. How are you this evening?
Good evening, Jason. I am absolutely delighted that you are here and glad that I turned on my iRig mic. Again, shout out to Peggy George for pointing that out. I guess had done some reconfigurations. And anyway, coming from Oklahoma City, where we have no idea how many coronavirus instances we may have, because I don't think the testing kits have been available, and people have been calming folks by saying, and we just only have, one in Oklahoma. And, that footnote should say, because we haven't tested very many folks. So we have been feverishly planning the last 2 weeks at school to have learning at home or remote learning. And so my Geek of the Week relates to some resources that I've been building. And I'm actually, there's all kinds of mixed feelings, but on a purely instructional level, I'm looking forward to the opportunity that I will have with our teachers to learn a lot of stuff. And, having been the director of distance learning for 5 years at the Texas Tech College of Education, I feel like I have been preparing for this time, and it's genuinely going to be a time of learning. So can you tell us a little bit about where you have been? And then we need the requisite Montana weather report, because spring has sprung here in central Oklahoma. The Bradford pears are the trees that tell us spring is here. And I actually went to a friend's house after work today, and he has two in his front yard, and the pungent odor, just about knocked me over. So that activates everybody's allergies. And so if you're not being affected by coronavirus, the Bradford pears will get you. So how's life in Montana right now? Are you guys done with winter?
We are not done with winter. It is raining outside right now and 39 degrees, but I know over the weekend, I'm just seeing what the low is going to be. Sunday morning will hit 1 degree. So I think a little winter reprise is in our relatively near future.
You're going to hit 1
So
degree?
It'll be chilly. Uno.
Whoa.
Yep.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, so it'll be cold. That's kind of how Montana spring goes, that it's very rarely a simple open and shut case. So but that's the way it goes. So and I had some people reach out to me on Twitter directly. I am immunely suppressed American. Is that the term? My immunity is suppressed because I am a kidney transplant recipient, as we've talked on the show in the past. And so obviously I take the coronavirus thing seriously from the standpoint of I am an identified risk case according to both the CDC and state and local officials in Montana. So I'm looking carefully at this. But obviously, since I am a current distance learning guy, I've spent a lot of the last week thinking about my organization and also finding ways we can help support Montana schools in this. And Wes, you used a term I'm really glad you used, because I think it's a really important thing to make a distinction about. You said remote learning as the term of what I consider to be the term of art now, because it's really important to make a distinction between remote teaching and distance learning. There's something similar there in online learning classes. That's all kind of a different piece. And my guess is that there will be a lot of discussions in the coming hours, days, weeks, and months about the concept of distance learning. And we haven't talked about as much here on the podcast, but one of the things that I'm very passionate about is that I think the debate is rather trite on whether distance learning and face-to-face learning can be equivalent or the same. There's a lot of research that suggests that it depends on which questions you ask, and there isn't a definitive answer really about that. But in my mind, because of how important distance learning is to people in rural areas, people that have unique circumstances, people that don't fit the traditional boxes of public school, then for me, I think it's important we make distance learning, online learning, the best it can be. And so I'm looking forward to, and I have been watching through these discussions quite adamantly in the last week, especially watching high schools and colleges plan with their faculty about what it might look like to send their students home and attempt to continue an environment. So that's kind of where my discussions are right now.
And I just shared this on Facebook tonight. We have two students, two children, first time to have two in college. Thankfully, one will be graduating in May. Not sure what, hopefully this is going to allow us to go out to Colorado in May. We've made the decision not to leave Friday to go see him, but he is at the Colorado School of Mines. They have just announced today that they are not going to close campus, but they are going to go all online as of March the 30th. I hope they'll still have access to his robotics lab. I mean, he's a mechanical engineering major with a computer science minor. So anyway, that's going to be interesting. Our older daughter is a freshman here in Oklahoma City in Edmond at the University of Central Oklahoma. They just announced today they're going to extend their spring break a week to actually, I think, help their professors and instructors get ready better, which that actually sounds good. I think it was John Becker on Twitter mentioned last week, like, teaching online is not a little light switch that you can flip. You don't just, I think I'll just teach everything online. I mean, it's huge. And so anyway, I think that's good. But so they're going to be out for 2 weeks and then probably going online. And so, yes, it is an exciting time to be in education. I would say, Jason, it's a good time to know some things about distance learning. And one of the things I want to pick your brain about, maybe, and we could do it later, but is this like some of the support resources that you all have for like web browsers? And because we right now are talking about what our online support will look like, not only for our faculty, but for students and for parents. And we are wanting to draw some clear lines and boundaries. Maybe about a month ago, we visited 4 schools in the Dallas area, one of which is a bring your own device school for middle and high school. It's called Parish Episcopal School. And that was one of the clear things they said is, when you're touching someone's personal device, you draw clear lines, because the last thing that you want is for anybody to say, oh, well, it was working fine until Dr. Fryer came and, messed it up. So right. Anyway, maybe afterwards or whatever, I'll if you've got any of those kind of resources, because we're basically we've asked everybody, do you have high-speed internet? Can you run the Chrome browser? And then for our younger kids, they could be using an iPad. But yeah, that's I would never have thought we would be in this situation in my current school, because we surveyed our faculty with the readiness survey, and 33% have not been using an online platform for any kind of resource sharing. They've done grades and shared what the assignment is, but yeah, we have some real good opportunities to work with our faculty and help and our students. And I think it's going to be very, very positive. But the support side of it is somewhat nerve-wracking when you think about how many folks you're talking about, and that we're really not geared up, or we haven't been geared up to do that.
Well, and you make a really important point that I do think has been missing in the larger conversation about getting ready for this kind of remote teaching, remote learning situation, in that if you're assuming your students are bringing with them extraordinary talents to handle this stuff on their own, you are very much mistaken. And I'll give you an example of this. MTDA, we serve, across the program, it's over 10,000 individuals across the state, but specific to our distance learning program, it's about 3,500 students a year. And yes, a good percentage of them do just fine, finding access, figuring out the basics of the technology, the difference between a desktop and a browser. Those things I think that get taken granted quite a bit in teaching computer skills, K-12. But there will be students that will struggle fairly mightily with this. And I'll tell you, it's not a majority of students, but there will be certainly a notable minority of students that will use technology excuses in a way that you will have never seen before, because anything that goes wrong with the technology tends to become an excuse to not complete work.
It's not the dog ate my homework, it's the Chrome browser failed to render. Yeah,
and you'll start to notice patterns over time, and that's one of the things that's actually interesting about my job, is that I don't directly directly run the help desk much anymore, but when I am on the help desk in the years where I was primarily in charge of that, as it turns out, you start to learn which excuses mean what and which technology claims mean what. But it is really important to remember you're going to have to support your students through this. And the other piece of this is that the most struggling of students will need even more assistance, because it's not just the computer piece of it, although that's significant. It's that many of those students may not feel comfortable in the online environment, or don't know how to ask questions, or are uncomfortable with the barriers that technology can introduce. And that's where I think we need to be thoughtful and cautious when we take these types of projects on. And I get it. If we have a pandemic at play, there's going to have to be some compromises. That's the way it's going to have to work, right? But at the same time, I think we need to be very thoughtful about supporting all of the individuals, adults and children, through this process.
Absolutely. Well, we are going to be touching, I'm sure, more on those kinds of issues. We want to let people know they can go to edtechsr.com/links to access the Google Doc, where until 5 minutes ago, Jason had added all the links, and I've been feverishly using my lovely Chromebook. So, Jason, it's great. My Chromebook comes in handy. I had to actually pull it out for a meeting this week. But we're going to be talking about some different topics. So actually, where would you like to go? What would you like first, Alex? We have breaking news, COVID-19 stuff, educational implications for COVID-19, Chrome OS, Apple, security, tech industry, something, nerddom, and media. So what will it be, Dr. Neiffer?
Let's go ahead and do a couple of quick COVID articles, and let's be done with this for the night. There's a really great article.
Good luck with that.
yeah, no kidding. There's a really great article on The Verge, on today's edition of The Verge, and it doesn't directly apply to education. The article is called "How to Work from Home," and I did work from home a good percentage of my early days with my current position. I was living in one town and working in another, and although I did spend usually 1 to 5 days a week in my physical office, I did work out of the home quite a bit. And I have the ability to do so with my current job. I don't do nearly as much as I used to. But I will say working at home sounds like a panacea when sometimes it can be really difficult to stay productive at home. And I thought this Verge article did an extraordinarily good job of kind of breaking down how you should kind of handle yourself should you be a teacher and administrator and find yourself stuck behind a laptop for 8 hours a day. So just the broad headlines here. And again, I agree 100% with all of these. First, as much as you can, have a separate workspace. It's like a dedicated office space. Don't work in your living space, right? I know that's not possible depending on what your life circumstances are, the size of your home, whether you have kids, or what factors may play in that. And obviously it's a pandemic, so that could impact too who's all in your house at any given time. But that's an important piece. Second one is you should establish a routine. Don't assume that you can roll out of bed at 7:59 and start working at 8, and that's going to be a long-term successful strategy. Let me be clear, I've done that before working at home, but I am much more productive when I get up at a consistent time every day and I have my cup of coffee and I kind of clear my head before I sit down for work at 8. And then on the opposite end of that, you really need to be done at 5 p.m. every day, or whatever your work hours are established. I know you're a teacher. I know you probably have homework to grade and those sorts of pieces, but you need to do your best to try to leave it alone if all of your students find yourselves suddenly online. I think that's an extremely important. I would also encourage you to, I assume that if you're trying a remote teaching gig based on district guidance, you probably have Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams or one of the many messenger systems or Remind 101 or one of those systems set up for communication. Do yourself a favor and either turn off the notifications on your phone or at least turn them off after, let's say, at 6 p.m. at night. You do not want to become a 24-hour worker just because you're a digital worker, and that's really important. And considering if we get to this point where there is wide attempts at this remote teaching concept, it probably means there's other stresses in our environment, and you don't want to compound that by then working 18-hour days. This is actually something I used to do too. Dress the part. Don't just be in your PJs. Get into work clothes every day so you can set a differential, right, between 7:59 and 8 a.m. every morning. Make sure you know your body and if you need to get up and walk, because my guess is that as a classroom teacher, you're probably on your feet quite a bit. now that you're going to be sitting down and doing most of the work in that way, you need to be up. I try to take at least a 2 or 3 minute jaunt every 30 minutes at my desk job each and every day. I walk usually for 20 minutes every 3 or 4 hours. I also take a big walk at lunch. I need to be up and around. If you can set up a standing desk, not the fancy ones, you can certainly purchase one of those, but you can look online for DIY standing desks. And even stacking up textbooks and putting your laptop on top would be better than sitting down all day, although there is some disagreement about that now. And then also make sure you have all the tools that you need. And one of the pieces of advice that we're following at work is that we think that there's a chance that something could happen that means we would lose access to our office without the ability to go in and get stuff. And so I'm asking all of my folks to carry their laptop home with them every night, make sure they have kind of a what I would call a war bag with them, like all the things you need to get your job done in a bag, so that, and you're carrying it back and forth with you to home to work. And, not everyone is going to carry, extra stuff with them. And in fact, I'm okay because I have, plurality of computers at home that can help me out here. But assuming you're just using a school laptop, for example, make sure your charger comes home with you every night. Make sure your laptop itself comes with you every night. Prepare for being a home worker.
Wow. Is that all in that article, or is that a lot of your...
Yeah, I mean, it's all in that article. But
did you write that?
I did not write that. So,
wow.
But it's so good. And it's like, and it's when I did work at home, I struggled a little bit, right? I was someone that's like, wow, I can get up at 7:59 and work at 8, and then I wouldn't shower sometimes in the morning. And in fact, I know someone that works now at Open LMS. He was at Moodle Rooms and then Blackboard and then at Moodle and then back to Open LMS. And he had a phrase that we actually adopted in our organization. He called it one sock mode, that when you get up in the morning and you check your email before you get going, and then suddenly it's 11 a.m. and you only have one sock on, and you're not, you've already deep in, whatever is your day. And my guess is if you're a teacher, you're going to be pretty engaged with your students. I think, you have to be able to find a way to put yourself mentally in that space. So
what a phenomenal article, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Jason Neiffer, guru of remote learning. So you like remote learning better than distance learning then, for what you're doing at the Montana Digital Academy?
No, we prefer online classes, distance learning. That's what we do.
Okay.
But the folks that are going to try to put their classes online and maybe meet real time with their students, we consider that to be remote teaching. And part of the reason why there's a differential there too, we've read a lot of stuff on this in the last, obviously, 96 hours. But one of the things that is also very much happening is that a lot of districts know that if they move to remote teaching, some kind of online piece, they may lose half their kids, right? Because they don't have access at home. And providing that access might prove to be extraordinarily expensive. And so I know I read an article today that the superintendent in Seattle, who is Denise Juneau, she's the former state superintendent in Montana, Seattle's going to go a different route because they know that trying to rely on online pieces will leave a significant number of their school population behind. So they're working on learning packets. They want to have, paper's the ultimate technology, right? Because it's extremely portable and it works without a battery and doesn't require a cell signal. And so I think a mix of strategies is really important here.
Wow. That is phenomenal. All right. Well, we're going to have some other coronavirus related topics. I think I want to go to a security one. And this is pretty amazing. So I put this down under the security title. This is from Cyberscoop on March 10th. Microsoft strikes back at Neiffer's botnet by preemptively disabling hacking tools. Wow. How many of our students and teachers know what a botnet is, know why they're so malicious and bad, and then recognize how updates on our own devices, that's not just our laptops and desktop computers, that's our mobile devices, that's now our Internet of Things. All of these devices that connect to the internet can become part of botnets. And a botnet is a collection of compromised devices. So this is a really amazing article. And it also points, we've talked about this on the show before, to white hat hacking and also the transnational nature of global cybercrime, right? It's just the hostility and malicious intent, which is present now online and literally can reach into everyone's pocket, purse, backpack, and house and school, I think is very underappreciated. And so this is an outstanding article, and kudos to Microsoft for this very sophisticated campaign that took, tons of time and collaboration. I think they said during a 58-day period in our investigation, for example, they observed that one of these infected computers sent a total of 3.8 million spam emails to over 40.6 million potential victims. And the collaboration that they worked with involved over 35 different companies. And, it's staggering. They actually at Microsoft say that, I guess, the computers, they generated 6 million new domains. Oh, this is what they did that were likely to be taken over by the scammers and in the next 2 years. And so anyway, multi-year project, tons of countries, like the scope of this. And so amidst the news, right, of number one, coronavirus, number two, elections, and, who's going to win the Democratic primary and all of this. I mean, like, we're not even going to talk about foreign policy, but like we're attempting to sign a peace agreement in Afghanistan to end 40 plus years of warfare. Like there's really big headlines that are happening outside of the main ones. And so this is an article that you probably didn't see and you might not pay attention to. I think it's definitely worth your time. And Jason, what are the implications of botnets and their existence to us? You might even have an article in the lineup that relates in some way to perhaps wiping devices or spring cleaning?
Sure.
Any thoughts there?
I did post an article, which I got a decent response back about, that says, this is from Wired on March 8th. I love this. Reset your computer once a year for a happier life. And by reset, they mean wipe your computer, reinstall the operating system, reinstall all the programs. And I know that I do this. I know that Dr. Fryer does this because I've seen him post list of apps before that he saves just so he knows what to reinstall. And then now that I'm a Chromebook guy, that's literally a sign in, and it takes about 6 minutes for everything to restore to exactly the way it was before, which is one of the reasons why I love the Chrome platform. But I can tell you as a Windows user, and to a lesser extent, but also important, a Mac user, about every 12 to 18 months, I find it not just useful, but also a time saving to spend a morning wiping my computer, starting over again with a fresh version of the operating system with the latest drivers available from the manufacturer. And what that does, it has several advantages to it. One of which is that you guarantee your computer will run faster. That as you install software, whether you keep it installed or uninstall it, and as updates are installed over time and security patches, that there's a lot of cruft that builds up in an operating system. Whether you're a Mac person or a PC person, it is absolutely true of both sides of that equation. And it will run faster. It's less likely that software will have errors and issues because you install fresh versions of that software, and oftentimes updated versions of that software. And there are cases where, from a safety and security standpoint, there might be something malware-wise, or unfortunately installed something or another, code, plugin, botnet software could be hiding around somewhere that you'll get rid of by just regularly resetting your device. Now, I have to say, it's not necessarily for the faint of heart, but there are extraordinary instructions online. There's so many guides from so many websites on how to do this. And I also think if you only have basic troubleshooting skills right now, learning how to do this, assuming you're backing everything up and you're safe, go safely about that process, you will learn so much about troubleshooting computers, things that go wrong, and how you can fix those things. So yes, great advice, I think. And I know, Wes, you had said that you were into this too.
And funny you should mention that, because the last pretty much 2 weeks of my life, and this will sound like such a developed world issue, I have not had a functioning Siri companion. And I have learned that my normal has been completely reset by voice to text. I have been just struggling to, use this thing called a keyboard on my phone to type into it. So literally, we finally said, hey, time to get rid of the iPhone 7. Cheapest new phone from Apple is an 8. So I got a pretty nice trade-in price. And what I'm doing literally right now as we webcast, because I might not download all of my apps right now, right? Because that's bandwidth-wise on our network, maybe not the best idea when you're doing a video conference. But what is so cool, having everything backed up to iCloud, this isn't Chrome in terms of just log in and it's all there. But Apple with a full iCloud backup is fantastic. So I have another device, an iPad, and I can go ahead and continue, and it's just and it's going to connect and recognize, oh, you're setting up a phone, and it's going to let me transfer my information. It's all going to download. So it can take a couple hours actually to do that, and so that's it's a different technology. It's a whole different ecosystem. We're still continuing to have discussions about what is it that we would like to be setting up, in potentially a year and a half. Do we want to have an iOS universe? Do we want to have a Chrome universe? We have both now. So anyway, very good. What else? Anything else on the security front or somewhere else?
Yeah, a couple of security articles that are pretty good. CNET has an article from, let's see, this is from today, that I thought was kind of interesting. It tries to take advantage of old password advice and reverse it because the password times have changed. I thought this was interesting. I'm not entirely certain if I agree with these or not, but I think they're worthy of discussion. The three things that they used to say that you shouldn't do that you can do, or that you can do now. The first one is writing down passwords. And they were talking about I've seen these things for sale, that storing passwords in a password book or in a little notebook. I'm partial to miniature notebooks, which I carry one around with me all the time. But having your long password in a little portfolio or in a little password saving notebook, and then storing that somewhere safe, a lockbox, hidden location in your home, is a better strategy than having a really easy to remember password. And I thought that was interesting. That's in fact what my parents do with their super secure passwords. And I would say when I first saw them do it, it felt a little old-fashioned, but I do think it's a smart strategy, especially if your goal is to have a different password everywhere. Now, don't put your password on a sticky note and stick on your monitor. That's not good advice. And for those of you that watched the last season, early season of Silicon Valley, that's kind of a funny joke about that show, but don't do that. Do share accounts, which I thought was interesting. And they were talking about from a password security standpoint, having what you can do for a password to share and what that does for security, and also that a lot of places allow you to share accounts, especially within family, so that's okay to do. And then the last one that actually has been advice that I've heard several times in the last couple of years is don't constantly change your passwords. And I have seen security researchers say that, once a year, once every 2 or 3 years, that's realistic. But the folks that are having people change passwords every 90 days or every half year, they're just encouraging people to create less secure passwords. And so that's an important thing to
put them on sticky notes and put them on their monitor.
Yeah, encourages all the other sloppy security habits that we've talked about here on the show. So I thought that was interesting, and something certainly interesting. And the last one that I want to mention for just a moment, because I feel like I'm kind of the Pied Piper of bad Android apps, but really interesting article from Gizmodo on March 9th that there was a single Android developer that had made 24 VPN apps, and they worked as VPNs, but the problem is they also tracked all your behavior and reported it back to the company. So they were essentially spy apps. And we've talked about the need for VPNs here before. And in fact, in a presentation I gave last week, I talked about the importance of VPNs. But remember, and this is especially true to share with kids because they're unlikely to pay for a VPN, find a reputable VPN company, read reviews on them, do your research, and pay for a VPN. Do not use a cheap free VPN, which is fairly likely to either be so slow it's unusable, or if it does seem pretty fast, it's trading something away to give you that for free.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm a bit of the media literacy guy, so I'm going to probably do a couple articles here. Politics is going on. We're not a political show, but hey, technology impacts politics. So sometimes we talk about this stuff. This is a foreign policy article from March 9th. So Jason, with his debate history, will probably like that. The title is called "Truth Has Become a Coronavirus Casualty." From Beijing to Washington, governments have been muzzling scientists, inflating the success of their containment efforts, and discrediting valid reporting. Citizens have to fight back. So, this is if I have a broken record on the show, besides talking about security, be safe, probably, it's this idea of media literacy and how we all need to be talking about media literacy and seizing the teachable moment. And so, the story of how the coronavirus in China was delayed in its reporting because literally the Chinese government was putting people in prison who were reporting it and talking about it. And then finally it became such a big deal that the president had to reverse course and, announce that you'll be in trouble if you don't, report this and just, do a 180. This is a great article about that history. And then also talking about Iran and the ways in which they, both have tried to muzzle doctors. But unfortunately, folks, this isn't limited to China and Iran. What we've, seen happen. I heard this on NPR today. I don't know if you caught it, and I don't have this in the show notes, but some leading, scientists and medical, I think they're, medical organizational leaders were testifying before the United States Congress today. And in the middle of the hearing, they were called to an emergency meeting at the White House, and then they had to cut their testimony short and leave to go meet with someone at the White House. One of the pullout quotes from this article says, "What's new and deeply disturbing is that the virus of disinformation has infected the highest levels of Western government, like the United States." So this isn't a situation where we can just look at China and Iran and say, "Oh, you guys are so terrible. Look at how you mishandled this." We really need to stand up for the media and for the idea that we have good quality journalism. I have been pointing my 5th and 6th grade students, because we're not getting into the deep weeds of disinformation in terms of the weaponization of it and political dark arts and, talking Cambridge Analytica. Okay. I'm not going there with my 5th and 6th graders. They see memes about it and they're aware of that kind of stuff. We're talking a lot more about just advertising and influence and the ways in which media is crafted for a message, but we're also talking about sources and how do you know that something is, believable and trustworthy? What sources do you believe? And then, do you read laterally and confirm things? So I've pointed my students to Google News and especially the full coverage to be able to see a gamut of voices. And then also it's been purchased. It started at the University of Missouri in their journalism department, but Newsy, Newsy. I have that app on my Apple TV in my classroom and frequently we'll watch that. We also analyze the videos to look at how, usually about 45 to 60 seconds into it, they show the reporter. But, we talk about A-roll and B-roll video. A-roll's headshot. B-roll is what you don't ever see on this show because we're not that fancy. We just show ourselves talking. But anyway, why people who are creating media do that, et cetera. So great article from Foreign Policy. I know this touches on politics, Dr. Neiffer, but do you have any thoughts?
We're living in extraordinary times, and I think that's one of the things that we need to approach this situation with that in mind, that these are definitely extraordinary times. And it is interesting that we are in the presidential election year and we are at year 4 or 5, depending on how you look at it. What I've referred to on the show as a technology correction, this notion that we're reconsidering where technology plugs into our lives because of perception that's gone in the wrong direction. The fact that's all happening at once will try us as a society, as a culture. as a human race, and we need to step up to that. And I'm so glad, Wes, that you're working on that media literacy piece with students, particularly at that age too, where they are definitely part of the culture enough to where they will hear an extraordinary amount of information, but may or may not be getting an opportunity to be challenged, to think about their assumptions, to question what they're hearing, to find multiple channels of information. And so,
they've questioned so much that they think there's not anything that's valid. That it's all. It's sort of like I think that's the Vladimir Putin dream, right? Is that we're just going to give up on truth and decide there are no trusted voices. And anyway, that's not a good place to land. I want to give a shout out. I didn't even notice this because I clicked over on comments or on the private chat and not seen. So we have Alfonso joining us on Facebook Live, and he shared earlier in the evening they have 13 campuses in his district, and he is the only instructional technologist. And Alfonso, I'll say, if you hang out for the Geek of the Week, or you can just check it out right now on the links, some really, I think, excellent links. That's another thing this is a catalyst for, right? There's a lot of great resource sharing that is happening. This is a great day to be a connected educator, and to be, able to crowdsource content and share resources. And Alfonso also points out digital literacy is important to teach during the year and continue from elementary to graduation, and even for teachers. And I would say, yes, that is absolutely true. Where should we go next, Dr. Neiffer?
Let's do some kind of more techier stuff, because this one's really interesting to me. The Verge report on March 9th that iOS 14 will reportedly have improved mouse cursor support. And I thought I was going to have to be in a couple meetings this week via FaceTime, because I have kind of isolated myself a little bit. I am going to work now each day, but I was going to have my partner in crime at work, Mike, carry me into a meeting with FaceTime iPad. So I got my trusty iPad 2 out, and actually, I'm sorry, iPad 2 mini, I should say. So it's a little newer than that. But I was laughing to myself because it's like, man, this thing's feeling a little more sluggish. Like, I'm used to iPads lasting a little longer here from a sluggishness standpoint. Well, the iPad mini 2 was 2013. So as it turns out, it is nearly 7 years old. But I have noticed a lot more media lately that is about kind of the core question of whether or not the iPad, particularly the larger iPads, the 10-inch, the 12-inch iPad, the iPad Pro, whether that can really be a laptop replacement. And one of the things I do hear about is that a mouse interface is considered to be faster, or at least closer to what people are used to when you're doing work on an iPad. And the fact that they're adding more mouse support, I think, is interesting. I also think it's interesting that there are apparently trackpads in development right now. That's like an external trackpad that you could utilize, not unlike on a MacBook. So, Wes, I know that your iPad is very rarely not by your side, right? So I know that's a piece of your daily hardware. I know you've also used it as a laptop replacement before, but what is that status in 2020 for you?
Well, I've tried, not successfully. We just ordered a collection of brand new 7th generation iPads that actually have a dockable keyboard and will support the full, Apple Pencil 2 experience. There's a Logitech Apple Pencil compatible device that is supposed to be absolutely as good, and it's about half the price. So originally we were looking at that, and then some Lenovo 500E Chromebooks, I think, or the 500 series, and then doing some comparison, because we're looking at a device for one-to-one for middle school. And I think that when it comes to the context of one-to-one, it is absolutely not just what device do you like and you're comfortable. It's about what fits the culture of your school and where your teachers are, right? Because if teachers have been, for instance, as we have, steeped in the Google world for, I don't know, I think about a decade, we need to be looking at that carefully, and then how familiar, teachers are as well as students. Students are going to be able to adapt, but I'm drawing this out maybe longer than I should, but I think that the iPad is closer today than it ever has been as a replacement. I think it's really, and I haven't tried the keyboard that we ordered with these. it's essential that we have an excellent keyboarding environment. A couple of years ago, I was at the Atlas conference in California. I went to a panel discussion with a variety of independent school leaders. It could have been titled "How We Didn't Do Enough Professional Development and Whatever Else," and we had to dump iPads and go to Chromebooks, because I think there were either 2 or 3 of the schools represented. That was their story. And I'm not wanting to just necessarily throw them under the bus for professional development, but I do think it's a much bigger shift in general to ask people to move into an iOS environment than it is to be in a Chrome environment. Yes. I also think at the end of the day, if you use SAMR, which substitution, augmentation, modification, redefinition, you look at any kind of framework of instructional technology integration where you're moving, into higher order thinking and not just a replication of existing instruction and pedagogy. We can talk transformation all we want, and there's a lot of transformation you can do with all different platforms, but a lot of the technology integration that I have seen historically and continue to see is at a fairly low level, and a Chromebook can do it. Apple has always done a great job preaching, creation. I mean, I'm all about that, show what you know with media. So my desire would be to have the full 360 of tools to be able to, because this Apple Pencil, this is my Harry Potter wand. All right. I mean, it is phenomenal to be able to create with this. And I don't think that Chrome is yet there with the stylus, and just from what I've seen. In fact, shout out, if anybody has an example, if you're at a school that's doing phenomenal stuff with styluses and Chromebooks, I would like to know about you and what you're using, what you're doing. So I think the iPad isn't there yet. And see, Apple is not, this is a strategy and design thing. Apple is not wanting folks to dump any of their devices, right? I have 4 devices. I'm setting up my new phone, but I from Mac in Apple world, it's my MacBook Pro, it's my iPhone, it's my iPad, and I don't want to give up any of them. So I think that the iPad is closer than ever. Please ask me that same question maybe in another month or so. Of course, we may not be at school, so maybe ask me in quite a while. When this coronavirus thing is passed over, we're back at school, and we've been there for at least a month, I will have a better perception of what we can do with the latest iPad and devices. But I don't think that from what I've done up to this point, I see it certainly for myself as a laptop replacement. I see it as a secondary device, a powerful device, but not one that I have felt for myself personally as a teacher and a media creator, I wanted to just have as my single carry.
Yep. And I have to say, I do have, I did have a friend of mine, and I won't mention who he is in case he doesn't want this information to get out, but he has a spare iPhone sitting around his offices for a couple of months, and wanted to know if, I wanted to engage in the, Apple challenge now that I'm Google guy. And for me, it's an opportunity where I would like to update to a newer iPad, because it's been almost 7 years since I've purchased the current one, and it's slow. It does the job to play video, which is what I would generally do with that device. But maybe investing in a newer iPad. But I'm also super into the Apple Watch. But that's very tempting to me. Although I would say that I have gone really all in on the Android Wear side, and although I'm using older ones to some positive effect, I know that there's more going on the Apple Watch side. But this notion of being able to carry a light, thin iPad, and I have to say, I have access to the equivalent on the Chrome environment. This is the Pixel Slate that I purchased on Black Friday that I really like a lot, and it really does feel more like a laptop than a tablet to me. In fact, I very rarely use it only in tablet mode. I prefer having the keyboard case attached to it. But yeah, that's something I'm interested in.
I'm going to conferences now with just an iPad, and sometimes I'll sketchnote or
Sure.
just take hand notes. I've actually been playing with Microsoft OneNote. I've been doing some classroom observations, and wanted to play with that a little bit. So but if you're going to tell me right now that's the only device you're going to let me have, no, you're not. Yep. You're not taking away my laptop.
Yep. Okay. Well, actually, I think I had that last article.
Yeah, let me pick one up. This is from NPR, and this is I think back a little bit. This is March the 2nd, but it's titled "Twitter's Head of Site Integrity on Fighting Election Disinformation." We've talked a lot about this on the show, the way in which social media platforms have been weaponized and continue to be weaponized in a really, countermeasures and countermeasures to the countermeasures game of cat and mouse, where folks are trying to use those tools to give their ideas lift, and to basically take a message, have it amplified, whether it's with YouTube, with Twitter, other things, Reddit, 4chan. And if it seems to be getting enough attention via bots and algorithms, then real people will start to amplify that. And what the ultimate game is in some cases is really to target journalists and mainstream media, then to try to take that message. And so anyway, this is just really interesting about the steps that that Twitter continues to take, not only on the front of trying to identify, not shutting down people's free speech, but when there's exact messages that are going to be coming from hundreds or thousands of different accounts, and they're looking at behavior. This is something I mentioned. There's a great 3-part series that Destin, who has the Smarter Every Day podcast. In fact, if you want to search EdTech SR for Smarter Every Day, you can find a link to these, because it's been a while. But his series about the ways in which we've got like some of the smartest people in the world in Silicon Valley being compensated very, very well, I might add. I think probably better than all of us who are teachers or connected to some kind of organization, educational organization at this point. They are doing their utmost to try to figure this all out, and they're not able to get this, to be completely solved. So a good article from NPR, and then I think that was in part of a series. And I will add that I listened to that on my Google Home, because my routine continues to be have the Google Home Mini in the bathroom and use my voice to play whatever song I would like, or my Spotify playlists. And then I like to say, good morning. And I hear the weather, and I hear the, my calendar events coming up. And then I start to hear news. And so my first two, I have Reuters, I have the New York Times, the daily, and then NPR Technology. I usually don't get past that amount of time. But anyway, a good series, and glad to see that. Have you seen or noticed anything different this year, Dr. Neiffer, with the election, social media? Do you think we've come forward from where we are in 2016 in some ways?
Well, I certainly see no advertisements at this point. So, I mean, I do remember in 2016 being deluged with advertisements, and the fact that I can't even really think of other than direct candidate advertisements, right? I'm talking about third-party ads that I've seen almost none of. That seems to be a very distinct change. And I'm not sure, honestly, if Facebook can survive another presidential election that like 2016. Like, I don't think they've taken as dramatic of action as I would have expected them to be successful in staying off the threat. But at the same time, it does feel different and better. But I think the recent coronavirus and COVID-19 stuff, though, kind of does highlight the challenge of a world where everyone can be a media pundit, everyone can be a critic. And we've talked about here in the past, you're probably going to find no more passionate advocate for student voice than Wes in getting devices in kids' hands and having them create and tell their story. But that always comes at a balance, because if anyone can have a platform, anyone can have a platform. And so I do feel like the election is better. But like in the last couple of weeks, with the amount of, and this is especially very early on in the threat to the United States with COVID-19, there were some things that were spread around that were, mis and disinformation, right? The notion that there was meth that was tainted with coronavirus. That was actually that rumor was spread by a police department of all things, and within 24 hours had been shared a couple 100,000 times, and that kind of stuff, right? Like that's the issue here. And the telephone game, which I think is actually a fairly useful analogy when talking about the spread of misinformation or disinformation on social media, is a lot slower when you don't have the computers.
I will do another shout out to anybody who is doing media literacy lessons with students around memes. I think that is a new lesson that I ideally would like to do this trimester. We're like, I get to see my kids basically like 24 or 25 times every other day, and we're at like lesson 7. So we're almost a third of the way through the last trimester. But I have been struck, especially with my 6th graders, but some 5th graders too, because I think I have over a third. I did survey them, so I should get these statistics. But I mean, there's a good number of my kids on TikTok. They're seeing memes in different places, and so helping students being able to filter things. They see so many things that are jokes. Hey, some things aren't funny, right? But in certain contexts, people are saying that these things are funny, and then the way that disinformation gets woven into that. It really it's kind of crazy because we're not living in a virtual reality world yet, like Ready Player One, where we're strapping these headsets on our faces. But with the screens, like we each peer into, in some cases, a different part of the world. And so we've done some parent university sessions. I think since we last talked, we had I think the best one we've ever had, with a panel of 4 of our high schoolers, 2 juniors, 2 seniors, 2 boys, 2 girls. And it was focused around social identity and the fear of missing out. I think the best thing was just getting to have a little more insight into the world in which, teens live today and the things that they struggle with, screen time, and these kinds of issues. So I'm glad that we are having a focus at our school on media literacy and digital citizenship. And I think in addition to the coronavirus collaboration around things that we should be tools that we should be using, and ways that we can deliver content, interact with students, I think the media literacy and digital citizenship pieces are pretty important too.
Here.
Would you be willing to pick up? I think you put in the article from Recode on Amazon not stopping coronavirus price gouges.
Yes. And then that can lead me, sort of to the Geek of the Week. So let me talk about that. You've probably seen in national news that there have been instances where both automated and non-automated algorithms on Amazon have dramatically increased the prices of items that have become suddenly rare during the COVID-19 outbreak. And if you've been to a store lately, in fact, tonight twice a week, I usually will pick up groceries and sundries at the local Walmart. In fact, based on your advice, Wes, with the pickup system, which is revolutionized, I will never go into a big box store again, because if I can pull up to my car to the door and do it, it's really, in fact, it's changed my relationship with Walmart as a company, because I feel like I can actually put up with a trip there. But tonight I went, and to be clear, I am fairly well stocked in toilet paper, but I did go there tonight and just was going to pick up an extra pack for the heck of it for my storage, and they were out of everything except marine toilet paper. So that's the stuff that it's really thin and super quickly breaks down, so they can go through like boat septic systems. And the guy kind of laughed, and I said, yeah, that's not really what I'm looking for. And I said, there's no zombie apocalypse at this point, so I don't need to resort to marine toilet paper. But if you've been on Amazon lately, like your local store, they're running out of stuff. Hand sanitizer, disinfecting wipes, toilet paper is running low on stock. I actually decided that my strategy was to order on Amazon a big industrial case of toilet paper, like the stuff that you would find in a commercial restroom. So that'll be here on Monday, and I'm going to laugh. It's probably going to be in a pallet of toilet paper, but I'm prepared, right, for the new currency of 2020. But in some cases, if they run out, it's not that that there's none available. It's that third-party sellers will start to increase the price, and a lot of national media has pointed out things like $140 for a 4-pack of Purell, right, and that's obviously taking advantage of a international crisis, right? But Amazon really hasn't taken a lot of action. And the other thing you should also know is that a lot of this is automated. There's a reason why prices change sometimes very quickly on Amazon, and where you could put something in your cart on Monday, and on Wednesday the price goes up or down 10, 20, 30%. And it's because a lot of that is an automated process, and people don't really get that. And I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. And so one of the things to look out for is see who's selling it. If Amazon's not selling to you, it's a third-party seller, there's a chance of charging you more than they need to. You may be willing to pay that depending on what the particular item is on Amazon, but you want to be cautious of that, because I think that's an important part of, kind of buyer beware in 2020. And the bottom line is that if it's selling out on your local store shelves, there's a decent chance that's probably also selling out on online as well with major retailers. We just need to be cautious and also be a good consumer of this.
I will show you the animal. So yes, thank you for the updates. I think you need to take a picture of your toilet paper when it shows up. So
yeah, I will.
Moose was, oh my gosh, he got it again. No. Yeah, this is what he was eating, a tea bag. And he just snagged it again. So this guy has gained 20 pounds since January the 30th, and we just took him in. So yes, Moose makes his appearance, hopefully without disconnecting the webcast.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. But boy, puppies are some work. So make no mistake about that.
In fact, you may hear mine barking in the background. So
I did. I heard him talking.
Yeah, we're 3 minutes to the top of the hour. Wes, let's do our Geeks of the Week. What do you have for us this week?
All right. Well, a couple things. Number one, I've been working the last 2 weeks on an instructional support website. I am excited that I'll be aligning some colors to our school's crest here in the next few days, but this gave me an opportunity. The website is support.cassidy.org. And really the constituent part I'm building out is just going to be the teacher part. The parent part, I think, as well as the student part, is going to be all behind our login in the walled garden. But I'm very thrilled to have gotten the green light to continue building this out publicly on a Google site. And there was a school in China who I will properly attribute on here because I don't have it right now. But I really like what the site lets you do when you say you're a teacher is, what are you using? Google Classroom, Seesaw, or we're using what's called Blackbaud, or we call it My Cassidy. And then there's a question. What is your instructional goal or need to delivery, interaction, assessment, or support? And then I'm putting resources there underneath each one of them. And then I've actually built out modules that fit in because some of the modules go in more than one category, for instance, screencasting. So I'm really excited to have this opportunity to not only share resources, but try to envision how can I use, I think it's called layered complexity design principles, sort of like the ClickWheel iPad or VoiceThread. These are my good examples where there's a lot of choices, but you don't see all the choices at the beginning, right? Because it's too overwhelming. So anyway, that has been a work in progress for the last couple of weeks. And then also a couple of the related links for coronavirus. Carl Hooker, who was on the show last week, held a future ready Twitter chat, and then he put all of the best resources into a Wakelet for getting ready for coronavirus or just doing remote learning. And then Seesaw, which is a wonderful learning journal that we're using in many of our classes. I'm teaching with it, and all of our both elementary and preschool, pre-K through third grade primarily are using it a lot. And they have a great Seesaw for home learning. And to your point, Dr. Neiffer, some great resources under their administrator tab about wellness, about boundaries, about how we need to take care of ourselves and encourage our colleagues to take care of themselves in this time.
Yep, and I couldn't agree more. And also, watch out for your colleagues too. I mean, if you're listening to the EdTech Situation Room, you're pretty tech savvy. So I would guess that you'll adapt to this fairly well. Some of your colleagues are going to be terrified of this, right? And reach out to them and assure them that this is not something that you were expected to pick up to this point, right? Like, I'm sure that you're in districts that have done a decent job of preparing teachers to use technology effectively in the classroom. But what you're being asked to do here is different, and you need to acknowledge that and offer as much support as you can. And by the way, I will do this with colleagues in face-to-face schools in Montana. Like, reach out to Wes and I on Twitter if you if you have a question or a tool recommendation that you want us to make. Reach out to folks that think about this stuff, and let's all work together on this, because they're all our students, they're all our neighbors, and so we need to join together to figure this out together.
Amen.
So the last thing I would share with you, this article, I put it originally in the show notes as a regular article to talk about, but actually I think it's more interesting than an educational piece. I think it's a broader commentary in technology. But there's an extraordinary article from Maya Kristoff on, she's writing on Medium, why all the Warby Parker clones are now imploding. And Warby Parker, if you're not aware of it, is an eyeglass merchant. They were one of the first what's called DTC companies, direct to consumer companies. In their case, they sell one thing, or they used to sell just one thing, which was cheap eyeglasses. And what they figured out was that there's one manufacturer that makes almost all the eyeglass frames on Earth, and they sell them under various brand names at extraordinary markups. And so they sought to take eyeglasses, which are can be really expensive, and offer them at $99 a piece, including panes in the eyeglasses, and then sell them online without physical stores. And that was the creation of Warby Parker. I love them, partly because they have kind of the retro glasses thing. I figure if I'm going to wear glasses, I want them, I might as well have them, clunky on my head, because that's I think it looks good with my big round noggin. But the bottom line is that I get better quality glasses there, and I feel more satisfied with the transaction. And a lot of people have tried to reproduce this. You've probably heard of Harry's, that sells shaving supplies, and the Dollar Shave Club, and Casper mattresses, and Purple mattresses, and there's dozens of these. There's one called Brandless that recently has shifted away from kind of household staples at $3 a pack to CBD, which I think is kind of funny. But that article talks about, why is it so hard for these clones of Warby Parker to make it? And the answer is almost exclusively customer acquisition. Like, it is extremely difficult when you're selling one product to acquire and keep customers, because how often are you buying beds in your life, right? And I must admit, I'm a Casper mattress wannabe customer. I've wanted one for years. I haven't needed a mattress in 8 years, right? So I would consider myself a likely candidate to buy a Casper mattress, but I haven't needed one. So, so I'm not a customer until I suddenly need a mattress. So great article. It kept me very enthralled. I usually can't make it through long technical economic articles like that anymore. My attention span is a little shorter than it used to be, but great article. So in the show notes, and I highly recommend it. Well, Wes, where can the people find you online?
I am W. Fryer on Twitter. My blog, speedofcreativity.org, is where I periodically post some articles, share some podcasts. My media literacy curriculum is mdtech.cassidy.org. And now you can check out all the instructional technology, remote learning resources that I have been curating and sharing and will continue to build in, I think, the days and weeks ahead, and that is on support.cassidy.org.
Okay, and I am Tech Savvy Teach on Twitter, which is where I like to engage with folks. I also work with the Northwest Council for Computer Education, blog.ncc.org, and watch out on Twitter, because now that we've been talking for the last hour, I think I want to start at least trying to contribute some positive advice into the kind of Twitter sphere, because I do think that there's a lot of hand wringing right now for good reasons. It's a traumatic situation that we're in that's evolving very quickly. But like, a lot of you are going to be maybe thrust into something you don't want to be thrust into. Let's work together to try and make it the best situation possible for our kids.
One other thing, and that reminds me, Jamie, I think it's Cassup is how you say his name. He's the educational evangelist for Google. He had a fantastic 9-part Twitter rant last night that was talking about, his daughter and how with the high-speed internet they have at home and the device they have and the nice desk and the food and everything, like she'll be fine. But the number of students out there who are not going to be eating very much because they go to school to eat, and who don't have a situation at home where they're going to, be able to learn digitally. You mentioned Seattle and some packet plans, but I think it's a good time to reflect on educational equity. And I will put a link to Jamie Cassup's Twitter post about that. And anyway, that's it's a little serious issue to end with, but your thought brought that to mind. So I will look forward to seeing your tweets, because the wisdom which can come from the Neiffer home out to the world via the tools at our fingertips, it's going to amaze us all, folks. Let's just get started. Hold on to your hats in the next couple weeks for what you're going to be able to access.
Well, good. I'll get working on that right now. But this thing here is not wisdom from my Twitter account. It is the EdTech Situation Room. We are a once-a-week podcast. And by the way, thank you to all the great guest hosts that sat in my chair in the last couple of weeks. I've listened to two. Do we have three or two?
There were two. I took a week off.
So I've listened to both of them. So excellent episodes of the podcast. But I'm back, and I will be back next week. We are a Wednesday night podcast. We broadcast live. You can get links on Twitter or Facebook. We use StreamYard to live stream out to many places online. It is at 8 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Central Time, and like 2 or 3 or Daylight Saving Time, something UTC. If you don't want to watch us live, though, you can always go to us on our YouTube channel, download a smaller copy of the audio file at our website, edtechsr.com, where you'll also find the show notes, or you can find us in all the major podcast directories. We thank you for listening to this episode of the EdTech Situation Room. Have a great week. Thanks.